Joining us now with the latest is NewsNation White House correspondent Libby Dean, along with Behnam Taleblu, Senior Fellow and Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. It's great to have you both here on a Monday. Thank you very much. So, Libby, we've heard a lot of speculation, lots of reporting about what the president may be doing by deploying additional troops to the region. What kind of operation is the president considering at this point?
Well, the White House has never ruled out putting boots on the ground. That was something that the president said last night, that he had options, and that what we heard at the White House press briefing today. But you look at what those options are, and the president did an interview with the Financial Times where he was saying that he wants to seize that oil in Iran, and that would look like potentially taking Karg Island. And there is the talk of that requiring ground troops. So that's one thing. I mean, the Pentagon briefing tomorrow is where they likely won't reveal those kinds of things, but we could learn more after the president had said, I remember on Friday or Saturday, that there were over 3,000 targets left. And if that is the case, and you're looking at the timeline that we have, what does that mean? Does that mean ground troops?
And it looks like we hit some more targets tonight. Behnam, the president keeps talking about potentially making a deal. We might make a deal. It's unclear who we're talking to in the Iranian regime. Of course, they don't want to have meetings anymore together because we see how they've been taken out when they have those kinds of meetings. Are we not thinking of a certain way they're doing this? So are they negotiating with someone who's in the previous regime? Or when they talk about negotiations, are they maybe talking about someone who's not in the regime?
Well, I think it would be wise to look abroad to the exiled opposition. But the question right now, when the president is talking about a potential oil deal or a potential way to secure more tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz, he is probably talking about what's left of this rump regime. I'm talking like hardcore national security deep state. It was reported earlier today that he was in conversation, or that messages had been passed back and forth to Iran's parliament speaker, who actually is not subject to U.S. sanctions, but probably should be. He's a former member of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He's a former mayor of Tehran. He's someone who's bragged about personally having beaten protesters back up in 1999 and 2003. He's someone that the White House may be, I fear, looking to be some kind of a Delcy Rodriguez in Tehran. This guy's bio is the exact opposite of Delcy Rodriguez in Tehran.
When you say you fear, can you expand on that?
You know, the president is working towards a series, not just one, but a series of military wins against the Islamic Republic. But a military win in the Middle East needs to be nested into a larger political strategy to get a long-term political win. And, the Middle East is littered with all of these military victories by America, by Israel, by Saudi Arabia that haven't been nested in a larger political strategy. Iran is home to the most pro-American and the most pro-Israeli society in the heartland of the Muslim Middle East. They didn't turn out en masse just this January when the president said that he was going to stand with them just to have musical chairs at the top in Tehran. So that's why it actually has to be about pushing past this regime rather than locking in part of it in place.
Libby, we've heard this timeline of potentially 4 to 6 weeks. We're in the 4-week mark starting today. Have you heard anything else about what the timeline may look like going forward? Of course, as you mentioned, the White House and Pentagon aren't going to reveal exactly this. They've even said, we're not going to tell you when we're going to leave and we're going to stay, because that's a tactic we're using. In previous wars, we have done that to our detriment because it's a strategy. So have you heard anything about maybe expanding that timeline to the American public and making the case?
As far as not revealing it, I feel like they actually have been very clear about the timeline from the start of this. I remember the days after this operation began in Iran, President Trump said 4 to 6 weeks, and that is what Caroline Leavitt said today at that podium, that they are sticking to the 4 to 6 weeks. If you look at that timeline, that gives about 12 days for these negotiations to play out. But it's also last time we were in negotiations, and the last time before that we were in negotiations with Iran, that the U.S. moved forward with these military operations. So do the negotiations need to be taken seriously, given the president's post that we saw where he is threatening oil infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and also those salination plants, which did get a lot of criticism today in the White House press briefing room, because that can be considered civilian infrastructure within Iran. All of this to say there is so much on the table in this operation. Winding that down in 12 days is what the White House is forecasting, saying 4 to 6 weeks. The big question is if they're able to stick to that.
But on that, you have, while the European allies are still refusing to really get involved here, you have the UAE, Saudi Arabia, pushing the president publicly and, of course, behind the scenes. They've been doing this for years, but now we're really seeing it, saying don't leave until the job is actually done, because the Iranian regime cannot be a good neighbor. They've proven over and over again they cannot be coming to the table with good faith negotiations. So the question is, in these negotiations, can the administration really not trust, but think that they're operating in good faith and that the next guy in line is actually going to do what they say. And also, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, and that's something that's a big problem, both for the Iranian regime economically, but also for the rest of the world.
And even for U.S. competitors like China, which gets even more oil from the pro-American side of the Persian Gulf than the anti-American side. So lots of people have an economic interest, a political interest in keeping this critical waterway where 20% of the world's seaborne oil trade flows through. Now, here's the kicker. Many of the Arab states of the Persian Gulf, they've lived on the front lines of this threat for so long. They've been hedging, they've been hemming, they've been hawing. Now they're saying this stuff publicly, as you said, as well as privately. So actually now is the time for U.S. diplomacy to build a regional coalition, to present a list of demands as to what surrender from the Islamic Republic looks like in military terms, in political terms, in economic terms. And if you can't get that, then you have more political support to continue the military mission to degrade and hopefully dismantle what's left of this regime.
Very quickly, on the Strait of Hormuz, there's been a lot of talk about getting it open, the need to get it open, but who does it hurt the most to keep it closed?
Well, I certainly think in the long term it hurts the Islamic Republic the most because it means that we're going to be forcing it open. This is a regime that did this because it thought it was the Achilles heel of the West and of America. But they're doing this and they'll force Donald Trump's hand, and in so doing, they will lead with their chin.
Yeah, and that's why the energy agenda has been so aggressive. Libby and Behnam, great to see you both. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.